The sheriff's cruiser pulled up, then she saw his name tag. The morning that woman painted an HOA property line across my dock, she thought the whole lake would finally watch me get thrown off my own land. Her son was live streaming. The neighbors were outside, and she kept smiling while she called the police on me like she already owned the shoreline. What she didn't know was sitting folded in my jacket pocket, and what she really didn't know was who dispatch had just sent to answer that call. If you've ever seen power go to somebody's head, stay with me, because this one didn't end the way anybody on that lake expected. And if stories about land, dignity, and standing your ground mean something to you, subscribe and pull up a chair. There's a whole lot more coming down these back roads. Get off that dock, Mr. Furser. Vanessa Holloway's voice cut across Lake Briar Ridge sharp as boat propeller hitting rock. It was 7:12 on a Saturday morning, and I was standing at the end of my cedar dock, watering the flower boxes Claire built 20 years earlier with her own hands. The lake water was still smooth enough to mirror the pine trees along the ridge. Somewhere across the shoreline, an outboard motor coughed awake. Then Vanessa marched down my gravel driveway like she owned every inch of Montana. She had 2 HOA board members trailing behind her carrying clipboards. Her son Grace walked backward in front of them, with his phone raised high, live streaming to the Briar Ridge Facebook page. I could see the red recording light blinking from 30 feet away. At the mouth of my driveway sat a folding table with a stack of orange notices and a thermos of coffee like they were setting up for a parade. Vanessa stopped at the edge of my dock path and pulled a piece of white sidewalk chalk from her jacket pocket. "You are now officially under notice," she announced, loudly enough for half the cul-de-sac to hear. Then she bent down and dragged a thick white line across my gravel path from one side to the other. "HOA property. Do not cross." Grace zoomed the phone in close while she underlined the words twice. Across the lake road, curtains started moving. A screen door creaked open. Old Walter Griggs stepped onto his porch, holding a coffee mug against his chest. Vanessa straightened up and dusted chalk off her palms like she'd just completed legal work. "This shoreline now falls under Briar Ridge Community Enforcement Authority," she declared. "You are trespassing on HOA-controlled property." I shut off the watering hose. Didn't answer. Didn't move. That bothered her immediately. People like Vanessa fed on reactions. Anger, begging, raised voices, fear, silence made them nervous. Grace swung the camera toward me. "There he is, folks," he narrated dramatically, refusing lawful A directives in real time. One of the board members shifted uncomfortably beside Vessa. Patricia Sloan, new to the board. Mid-50s, nervous eyes. She kept glancing at the chalk line like she already regretted being there. Vanessa stepped closer. "Mr. Mercer, you lost your marina privileges 3 months ago. You are no longer authorized to access this shoreline." That almost made me smile. Inside my flannel jacket pocket sat 2 folded papers. The first was the original county deed, showing the shoreline belonged entirely to my property lot. The second was a certified withdrawal receipt, signed personally by Vanessa Holloway herself 93 days earlier. I carried copies every Saturday now. Habit, insurance. Across the road, more neighbors started appearing. Tom Reyes leaned against his mailbox with crossed arms. Marta Chen stood barefoot in her driveway, holding garden gloves. Nobody spoke. They were waiting. Vanessa noticed the audience growing and lifted her chin higher. "I've already contacted the sheriff's office," she announced loudly. "Law enforcement is on the way to remove you from HOA property." Grace pivoted the live stream back toward her dramatically. "Say that again for the camera, Mom." She smiled directly into his phone. "We are enforcing community standards." I set the watering can beside Claire's flower box. The wood creaked softly beneath my boots. That dock had survived 2 floods, 1 wildfire evacuation, and 4 Montana winters after Claire died. I'd rebuilt sections of it myself with frozen hands and a bad shoulder. Every board out there had a memory attached to it. Vanessa had lived at Briar Ridge for 6 years. 6 years was apparently enough time for her to think she owned a lake. She pulled out her phone and dialed 911 on speaker. "Yes," she said calmly when dispatch answered. "This is Vanessa Holloway, president of Briar Ridge HOA. We have an active trespasser, refusing lawful removal from community-controlled shoreline property." A pause. "Yes, he's still here." Another pause. Then her eyes narrowed slightly. "Yes, the property owner," she snapped impatiently. "But he's no longer compliant with HOA authority." Walter Griggs lowered his coffee mug slowly. Patricia stared at the ground. Grace kept filming. I stayed quiet, because every word Vanessa said was being recorded twice. Once by her live stream, and once by the black security camera mounted under the corner of my porch roof. Vanessa ended the call and slipped the phone back into her pocket. "They're sending a deputy," she said with satisfaction. "You should leave while you still can." I looked past her toward the road entrance, toward the bend in the trees where the sheriff's cruiser would appear. Then I reached into my jacket pocket and pressed my thumb against the folded certified receipt. Claire had told me years ago to never leave home without once lawyers got involved in anything. Paper beats noise, Ethan. Funny the things you remember. A gust of wind rolled across the lake, rattling the dock chains softly against the posts. Then came the sound, a short chirp of a siren somewhere beyond the pines. Grace spun around excitedly with the phone raised high. Vanessa smoothed her jacket and smiled like victory had already arrived. At the far end of Briar Ridge Drive, a sheriff's cruiser turned slowly into the cul-de-sac, and Vanessa Holloway stood taller, absolutely certain she was about to watch me get removed from my own property. The cruiser hadn't even stopped before the story in my head rewound 27 years. Back to when none of those houses existed. Back when Lake Briar Ridge was just pine trees, mud roads, and one crooked bait shop with a rusted Pepsi sign hanging over the door. Claire found this place in the summer of 1997. I still remember her boots crunching gravel the first time we walked the shoreline together. She stood at the water's edge with the wind blowing strands of brown hair across her sunglasses and said, "This lake feels honest." That was enough for me. We bought 12 acres 3 months later. Back then there wasn't any gatehouse, no HOA signs, no marina office with fake authority printed on laminated badges. Just ranch land stretching along the water, and a few working families who minded their own business. Claire and I built most of the dock ourselves. Pressure-treated cedar, iron brackets, every board stained by hand. The flower boxes Vanessa had interrupted me watering that morning were Claire's idea. She said every dock on the lake looked too much like a mechanic's garage and needed color. So every spring after that, she filled those boxes with blue lobelia and white alyssum, while I pretended not to care where the flowers went. 4 years ago, cancer took her in 11 months, fast. By the end, she barely had strength to walk onto the porch, but she still made me promise one thing: don't let anybody bully you off this lake. At the time, I thought she meant developers. Turned out she meant Vanessa Holloway. Vanessa arrived from Denver 6 years after Claire and I bought the property. Her husband worked commercial real estate for about a year before disappearing back to Colorado with somebody younger and quieter. Vanessa stayed, and within 12 months, Briar Ridge Estates transformed from a neighborhood into a performance. First came the newsletters, then the community shoreline initiatives, then the marina committee, then the fines. Nothing outrageous at first: trash cans visible from the road, kayaks stored too close to the shoreline, dock lighting violations. The kind of things tired people pay just to avoid arguments. Most of the residents around the lake were older. Retired ranchers, widows, veterans. Folks who heard legal words like covenant and enforcement authority, and assumed somebody official must be involved. Vanessa understood that. Fear was her business model. By year 3, she had people asking permission to repaint their own fences. I mostly ignored her until the marina fees started. $300 annually for shoreline maintenance, then $600, then mandatory dock inspections. One afternoon, she taped an orange violation notice to my mailbox claiming my fishing boat disrupted community lake aesthetics. My aluminum boat was older than her son Grace. I paid the first fine anyway, mostly because Claire had just started chemotherapy and I didn't have energy left for neighborhood wars. That decision bothered me later. Bullies treat silence like permission. The first real crack appeared 8 months ago. I was down at the county clerk's office renewing trailer tags when I overheard 2 marina contractors talking near the records counter. One of them laughed and said, "Hell, Briar Ridge ain't even under active shoreline authority anymore." That sentence followed me all the way home. 3 days later, I drove back to the county building. The records room smelled like dust, printer toner, and old paper. Ceiling fans pushed warm air over rows of filing cabinets, while a clerk named Denise helped me pull the subdivision records. I found the original marina agreement after almost 2 hours. 32 pages, signed in 2004. Buried on page 19 was the expiration clause. 20-year term pending renewal approval through county land management. No renewal attached, no extension filed. No updated covenant recorded. I read the date 3 times. The agreement had expired 8 years earlier, which meant Briar Ridge HOA had spent nearly a decade collecting shoreline fees and issuing enforcement threats without legal authority. I copied every page, twice. Then, I sat in my truck staring across the lake while snowmelt water rolled against the shoreline rocks. Claire used to say, you could tell when somebody was lying because eventually they got greedy enough to leave fingerprints. Vanessa had left an entire paper trail. That was the moment this stopped being about me. Because if she'd done it to me, she'd done it to everyone around this lake. And suddenly, all those orange notices taped to mailboxes looked less like rules and more like theft. That evening, Walter Griggs came by, carrying a rusted tackle box under one arm. He stood awkwardly near my porch steps. "You know anything about HOA liens?" he asked quietly. I looked at the tackle box. Inside were years of violation notices folded neatly beneath fishing lures and boat receipts. Almost $5,000 in fines, most of them over things no sane person would notice. Bird feeder placement, dock color, improper storage of lake equipment. Walter's hands shook while he held the papers. "My wife handled this stuff before she passed," he admitted. "I figured maybe I ought to start paying before they take the property." I looked from the notices to the lake behind him, then to the photocopies sitting on my kitchen counter. The expired agreement, the missing renewal, the empty legal authority nobody around Briar Ridge knew had vanished years ago. And for the first time since Claire died, I felt something stronger than grief. Purpose. I invited Walter inside, because by then I already knew one thing for certain. Vanessa Holloway wasn't protecting this lake. She was running a business built on people being too scared to read paperwork. Walter Griggs sat at my kitchen table, turning his coffee mug slowly between both hands while I spread the violation notices across the wood surface one by one. 23 separate fines, some handwritten, some printed on official-looking HOA letterhead with bold red warnings stamped across the top. Unpaid balance pending. Final enforcement notice. Property lien review. The oldest one was for $40 over improper shoreline seating. The newest demanded nearly $5,000 total for accumulated violations and late penalties. Walter stared down at the stack like it was a medical diagnosis. "My wife used to handle this stuff," he said quietly. "After she passed, I just kept paying whatever showed up." That sentence stayed with me, because that was the real engine behind Briar Ridge. Not rules, not property values, exhaustion. People paid because grief was already expensive enough. I asked Walter one question. Did anybody ever show you actual county paperwork proving they owned shoreline authority? He blinked once. No. Did anybody ever explain where these fines legally came from? Another pause. No. I slid the expired marina agreement across the table toward him. His eyes narrowed slowly while he read the highlighted expiration clause. Then he looked up at me. You saying they can't do this? I'm saying somebody's been counting on nobody checking. The next morning, I drove into Kalispell and met attorney Leah Grayson for the first time. Her office sat above a feed supply store downtown. Nothing fancy. Steel filing cabinets, black coffee, land survey maps framed on the wall. She read the marina agreement in silence, while I watched trucks roll past outside her office window. Then she opened the county deed records on her computer. 5 minutes later, she leaned back in her chair. Well, she said flatly, that's a problem. For who? For them. She turned the monitor toward me. No recorded covenant extensions. No renewed shoreline easements. No updated authority filings. Nothing. Leah tapped the expired agreement with one finger. Mr. Mercer, Briar Ridge HOA has no enforceable jurisdiction over privately deeded shoreline lots anymore. I already knew that part, but then she kept talking. And if they continued collecting mandatory fees after expiration while representing themselves as an active enforcement authority. She didn't finish the sentence immediately. Lawyers do that sometimes when they want the silence to carry weight. That crosses into fraud territory. Outside, a semi-truck downshifted hard at the stoplight. Inside the office, I felt something shift for the first time since Vanessa taped that first orange notice to my mailbox. Power. Leah printed copies of everything. Do not threaten them, she warned. Do not post online. Do not start neighborhood meetings. I wasn't planning to. Good, because paper wins these fights, not anger. Claire used to say the same thing. Leah handed me a yellow legal pad. Start documenting every interaction. Dates, times, photos. Save notices, save emails. And if they contact you in person, record it legally. I nodded once. Then she asked, how aggressive is this HOA president? I thought about Vanessa standing on my dock path with sidewalk chalk. Depends, I answered. How aggressive do people get when they realize the money might stop? Leah didn't smile. Then this is going to escalate. She was right. 3 days later, the next orange notice appeared taped to my mailbox. Unapproved dock stain, fine, $250. The cedar stain on my dock had not changed in 9 years. An hour after that, Grace Holloway rolled slowly past my property, a golf cart holding his phone out the side, recording my shoreline. By sunset, another notice appeared. Visual clutter violation. Reason fishing equipment visible from Lake Road. My tackle box sat on my own porch. The following morning, Vanessa herself showed up while I was repairing one of the dock cleats. She wore white sneakers too clean for Montana gravel and sunglasses large enough to hide half her face. Mr. Mercer, she called smoothly. You currently owe the Briar Ridge HOA $640 in unresolved compliance penalties. I kept tightening the cleat bolt. You planning to pay those? No. The answer hit her harder than yelling would have. She stepped closer. I don't think you understand how this works. I finally looked up at her. No, I said calmly. I understand exactly how it works. Grace lifted his phone higher. Vanessa recovered quickly. If these violations remain unpaid, the board may pursue lien review procedures. There it was again. The word designed to scare old people. Lien. I wiped lake water off my hands with a rag. Interesting, I said. You should probably double-check county authority before threatening those. For 1 second, her expression slipped. Tiny, but real. Then it vanished behind the smile again. You sound confused, Ethan. No, I replied quietly. I sound documented. That landed. I saw it in the way her jaw tightened. Grace lowered the phone slightly. Vanessa turned without another word, and walked back toward the golf cart. But before climbing in, she looked over her shoulder and said something that told me exactly what came next. "You're making a mistake embarrassing this board publicly." I watched them drive away along the shoreline road. Then I looked down at the fresh violation notice, still taped to my mailbox. The paper fluttered once in the wind off the lake, and for the first time I stopped seeing those orange notices as threats. They were evidence now, and Vanessa Holloway kept delivering them directly to my front door. By the second week, I had started organizing everything into manila folders across my kitchen table. Orange violation notices, photos of my dock, printed HOA warnings, screenshots from Grace's live streams, every page dated in black marker along the corner. Claire used to joke that I labeled paperwork like a homicide detective. Turns out she wasn't wrong. The folder marked Briar Ridge Ho sat thicker than the others already. Leah Grayson called me Thursday morning. "You ready to make this official?" I thought it already was. "Not yet," she said. "Right now they're harassing you. What we need is proof they knowingly continued after receiving legal notice." That afternoon I drove into town and signed the withdrawal letter in front of a notary. 3 pages. Simple language. Precise. I formally withdrew from the Briar Ridge Voluntary Marina Association, effective immediately. I revoked any claimed authority over my property, shoreline access, and dock use. Attached were copies of the expired marina agreement and county deed records. Leah made me send it certified mail. "Paper trails matter," she said again. 3 days later, Vanessa Holloway signed for it, personally at 10:43 a.m. I knew because the green return receipt landed in my mailbox Friday morning. I stared at her signature for a long minute. People always think intimidation is power. Real power is getting somebody to sign their own timeline. That same night was the monthly HOA meeting inside the Briar Ridge Marina Clubhouse. I didn't attend. Instead, I sat on my dock listening to the muffled hum of Butts Out on the Water while my phone buzzed twice after dark. The first message came from Patricia Sloan. Unknown number. She read your withdrawal letter aloud to the board. A second message arrived 30 seconds later. She made everyone vote to reject it. Then a third. But the minutes officially acknowledge receipt. I sat up straighter in the chair. That mattered. Legally, acknowledgement was poison for Vanessa's position. It proved the board had received formal notice and discussed it internally. An hour later, headlights swept across my gravel driveway. Patricia Sloan stepped out of an old Subaru, clutching a white envelope against her chest. She looked nervous enough to be smuggling narcotics. "I can't stay," she whispered before I even reached the porch. She handed me the envelope. Inside sat photocopies of the meeting minutes. Vanessa's signature appeared at the bottom, beside the words, "Board acknowledges receipt of membership withdrawal request." I looked back up at Patricia. "You know this could get ugly for you." Her laugh was short and tired. "Mr. Mercer, it already is." She glanced toward the dark shoreline road before lowering her voice. "She's been increasing the fines because people are paying faster now. Walter Griggs isn't the only one." "How many?" Patricia hesitated. "At least 14 households. That hit harder than I expected."
14?
Vanessa wasn't bullying isolated homeowners anymore. She was operating a system. Patricia left less than 2 minutes later. I filed the meeting copies into a new folder labeled False Claims. 3 days passed quietly after that. Too quietly. Then came Saturday morning. I was replacing a rusted hinge on my dock gate when Grace's golf cart rolled into the driveway. Vanessa sat beside him wearing oversized sunglasses and holding a clipboard against her chest. Grace filmed the entire approach. I kept working. Vanessa stopped at the gate. "Mr. Mercer," she announced loudly, "you currently owe the Briar Ridge HOA $1,480 in unresolved penalties and administrative fees." I tightened the hinge bolt another quarter turn. Interesting number. Failure to pay may result in lien review proceedings. There was that word again. Lien, designed to terrify retirees. Vanessa held out a yellow envelope. Final notice. I climbed back onto the dock and took it from her without opening it. Then I reached into my back pocket and unfolded a photocopy of the signed meeting minutes Patricia had delivered. Vanessa's smile faded instantly. I held the paper up where Grace's camera could see it clearly. You signed acknowledgement of my withdrawal 3 days ago. Grace lowered the phone slightly. Vanessa recovered fast. That document is invalid. You voted on it. No, she snapped. The board reviewed it. I pointed to the signature line. Looks acknowledged to me. The muscles in her jaw tightened. For a second, I thought she might actually walk away. Instead, she stepped onto my dock without permission, snatched the photocopy out of my hand, and tore it clean down the middle. Then again, and again. The pieces scattered across the cedar boards at our feet. Grace's livestream camera captured every second. There, Vanessa said coldly. Now it doesn't exist. The lake went quiet around us. Even Grace looked uncertain. I bent down slowly and picked up one torn piece from the dock. Vanessa's signature still showed clearly across the paper edge. Then I looked up at her. Photocopy, I said calmly. The originals are filed. That landed harder than yelling ever could have. Her expression flickered. Not fear yet, but calculation. She turned sharply toward Grace. Stop filming. Too late. I watched them drive away, down the shoreline road, faster than they arrived. Then I gathered the torn pieces carefully into my hand. Every one of them was evidence now, too. And somewhere behind all Vanessa's confidence, I could finally feel it happening. The first crack. The next Monday morning, a golf cart rolled slowly past my dock before sunrise. Electric motor humming, phone camera raised. Grace Holloway sat behind the wheel wearing a reflective vest with HOA enforcement printed across the back in white block letters. I watched him through the kitchen window while coffee brewed beside me. He stopped near my mailbox and zoomed in on the numbers like he was documenting a homicide scene. Then he drove toward Walter Griggs' property. That became the new routine. 3 times a day. Morning, afternoon, evening. The golf cart would creep along the shoreline road while Grace photographed docks, fences, boats, lawn chairs, trailers, even flower pots. Vanessa had turned harassment into a patrol schedule. I responded by installing cameras, 2 above the garage, 1 facing the dock path, another mounted under the porch roof with direct view of the driveway and mailbox. Cloud storage, automatic backups, timestamps. Leah Grayson approved immediately when I told her. Good, she said over the phone. Make them perform for evidence. That same week, neighbors started showing up at my door. Not together. One at a time, usually after dark. Marta Chen arrived first carrying a shoebox full of violation notices tied with a rubber band. Her offense list included improper wind chime materials, visible gardening tools, unauthorized seasonal decorations, total fines, $620. I thought if I kept paying, they'd leave me alone, she admitted quietly. 2 nights later, Tom and Jenna Reyes showed up with printed warnings over kayaks leaning beside their shed. Then came Frank Delaney, retired Army mechanic, fined repeatedly because the paint on his barn roof didn't match approved shoreline earth tones. Every story sounded different. Every fear sounded the same. Lions, foreclosure, property seizure. Vanessa weaponized legal language against people too tired to challenge it. I never told any of them to fight the HOA. That mattered. Leah warned me carefully. If this turns into organized retaliation, Vanessa will claim conspiracy or harassment. Keep it individual. Keep it legal. So I made coffee. I handed out Leah's business card. And I told every person the same thing. Document everything. No petitions, no Facebook groups, no neighborhood meetings. Just paper trails. Meanwhile, Grace's patrols became more aggressive. He started slowing down directly in front of my dock and narrating violations into his live stream like a park ranger announcing citations. possible unauthorized shoreline modifications, potential environmental non-compliance, improper storage equipment. One afternoon, he filmed my tackle box for nearly 3 straight minutes. I waved at the camera. That seemed to irritate him more than yelling would have. 3 days later, Patricia Sloan knocked softly on my porch door after sunset. She looked exhausted. "There's something you need to know," she said immediately. I stepped aside and let her in. She placed a folder on the kitchen table. Inside were internal HOA meeting notes. Vanessa had begun discussing forced compliance strategies, TOW authorization, marina lock changes, community isolation measures. I read that phrase twice. What the hell does that mean? Patricia rubbed both hands together nervously. She wants residents to stop speaking to non-compliant homeowners. I laughed once under my breath. Not because it was funny, because it was insane. Patricia lowered her voice further. "She's getting desperate, Ethan. Membership dues are dropping. 3 more households sent withdrawal letters this week. That stopped me cold. How many total? 9. 9 households. 9 families finally reading paperwork. Vanessa must have realized the same thing I had. Fear only works while people think you're legitimate. Once doubt spreads, the whole structure starts wobbling." The next morning at 5:11 a.m., my security app chimed beside the bed. Motion detected, front driveway. I grabbed my phone and opened the live feed. Grace Holloway stood beside my mailbox holding a black spray paint can. For 1 second, he looked directly into the camera. Then he painted over the mailbox numbers in thick black strokes. 214 disappeared beneath dripping paint. He climbed back into the golf cart and drove off laughing. I sat upright in bed staring at the screen while the timestamp blinked in the corner. 5:12 a.m. Federal offense. Mailbox vandalism. I didn't go outside immediately. Didn't call anybody immediately either. Instead, I forwarded the video to 3 places, myself, Leah Grayson, and a new digital folder labeled Incident Reports. Then I made coffee, because panic was exactly what Vanessa wanted from people. Calm documentation was what she kept accidentally feeding me instead. At 8 sharp, I drove to the sheriff's substation in town, carrying a flash drive in my jacket pocket. Deputy Mia Torres met me at the front counter. Mid-30s, sharp eyes, didn't waste words. She watched the mailbox footage twice without interrupting. Then, once more. When the video ended, she leaned back slowly in her chair. "That kid know he's on camera?" "Apparently not." She exhaled through her nose. "Defacing a mailbox is federal territory, Mr. Mercer." I figured. She looked through the rest of the incident photos. Golf cart patrols, violation notices, TOW warnings, screenshots from live streams. Her expression tightened more with every page. "How long has this been going on?" "About 6 months seriously. Longer unofficially." Deputy Torres closed the folder carefully. "This is starting to move beyond HOA nonsense." That sentence stayed with me all the way home, because until then, Briar Ridge still felt like neighborhood bullying dressed up in paperwork. But now, law enforcement was starting to see what Vanessa really built. Not an HOA, a pressure machine. And machines panic when people stop being afraid of them. 3 mornings after the mailbox incident, I walked outside at sunrise and found a bright yellow notice zip-tied to the driver's side mirror of my truck. Unauthorized vehicle. Subject to immediate HOA towing. The Briar Ridge logo sat printed across the top beside Vanessa Holloway's signature in thick blue ink. My truck was parked in my own driveway. I stared at the paper for maybe 3 seconds before noticing the scratch. It ran the full length of the driver's side door. Deep, fresh, metal exposed beneath the black paint. For one brief moment, real anger hit me hard enough to tighten my chest. That truck was Claire's favorite thing I ever bought. We'd driven it through Yellowstone the summer before she got sick. She used to leave sunflower seed shells in the cup holder, no matter how many times I cleaned them out. Now somebody had dragged a key down the side of it like they were carving initials into a gravestone. I forced myself not to touch the damage. Instead, I took photographs, wide angle first, then close, then timestamps. Then I opened the security app. The driveway camera loaded immediately. 4:37 a.m. Grace Holloway stepped into frame wearing a hoodie and carrying the yellow tow notice. He zip-tied it to the mirror. Then he looked toward the street. The camera angle caught Vanessa standing near the shoreline road beneath the street lamp, with her arms crossed, watching. Grace pulled something metallic from his pocket. Then he keyed the truck slowly from front fender to taillight. Not rushed, not reckless, deliberate. When he finished, Vanessa nodded once from the road. The two of them walked back toward the golf cart together. I replayed the clip twice. Then I called the sheriff's non-emergency line. Before dispatch transferred me, I said one thing very clearly. I'm requesting Deputy Caleb Mercer not respond to this call. The dispatcher paused. Relationship? He's my son. Another pause. I understand, Mr. Mercer. I'll note it. I hung up and poured coffee while waiting. 40 minutes later, Deputy Mia Torres rolled into the driveway. She stepped out holding a tablet already loaded with prior report numbers. That makes 9 incidents, she said before I even spoke. I handed her the tow notice first. She examined it carefully. This isn't even legal formatting. No. It's also fraud if they're representing fake enforcement authority. Then she watched the footage, once silently, then again, slower. When Grace dragged the key down the truck, Torres froze the frame on Vanessa standing beneath the street lamp. You recognize her clearly? Clear enough for court. Torres nodded slightly. I agree. She photographed the scratch, the tow notice, my mailbox, and the camera positions around the property. Then she lowered her voice. Mr. Mercer, I'm going to be direct with you. This is moving beyond civil harassment. I leaned against the porch rail. What does that mean exactly? It means somebody's eventually going to overplay their hand. Too late, I thought. Vanessa already had. Deputy Torres crossed the road and spent 12 minutes on Vanessa Holloway's porch. I watched from my dock while Grace paced behind her, holding his phone like a nervous teenager caught shoplifting. When Torres returned, her expression had hardened. She denied everything, Torres said flatly. Of course. She claims the HOA has authority to identify abandoned or unauthorized vehicles. My truck? In your driveway. Torres almost smiled at that. Then she handed me a new report number. 10. Keep documenting, she said, and don't engage directly unless necessary. I haven't been. I know. That afternoon, Vanessa escalated again. At exactly 3 p.m., every mailbox in Briar Ridge received a printed HOA newsletter. Patricia Sloan delivered mine personally after dark folded inside a grocery bag. The headline covered half the front page. Community alert. Resident weaponizing law enforcement against HOA volunteers. Below it sat a full paragraph accusing me of harassment, intimidation, and abusing family connections within county law enforcement. Family connections. So she knew about Caleb now. That changed things. I read the article twice standing at my kitchen counter. Then I noticed something else. Vanessa had included photographs of my dock and truck directly beside the accusations. Public targeting, public humiliation, more evidence. Patricia stood near the doorway wringing her hands nervously. She's losing support, she admitted quietly. 3 board members refused to approve that newsletter, but she published it anyway. Patricia nodded. She says if she backs down now, the whole HOA collapses. There it was. Not community standards, not property values. Fear of losing control. Patricia handed me another envelope before leaving. Inside sat internal meeting notes from the prior evening. One sentence highlighted in yellow marker. Need visible enforcement action before more residents withdraw. Visible enforcement action. I read that line twice. Then I looked toward the dark lake outside the kitchen window. Vanessa wasn't trying to win legally anymore. She was trying to win publicly. which meant eventually she'd need a spectacle, a removal, an arrest, something dramatic enough to scare the neighborhood back into obedience. And suddenly the fake tow notice made perfect sense. This was escalation theater. Every move louder than the last, 'cause quiet authority was already slipping away from her. At 9:14 that night, my phone buzzed. A text from Patricia. Emergency HOA meeting Friday. Vanessa says by next week, the Mercer problem will be solved. I set the phone down beside the folders stacked across the kitchen table. Outside, dock chains knocked softly against cedar posts in the dark. And for the first time since this started, I became absolutely certain of one thing. Vanessa Holloway was going to call the police eventually. She just hadn't realized yet who might answer. Friday night, rain rolled across Lake Briar Ridge, hard enough to rattle the dock chains against the cedar posts outside my kitchen window. Inside the Marina Clubhouse, Vanessa was hosting what Patricia called an emergency enforcement session. That was the official wording printed on the flyers taped around the neighborhood. Emergency HOA action meeting. Mandatory community attendance. Patricia texted me photos from inside before the meeting even started. Rows of folding chairs, coffee urns, Grace's phone tripod already positioned near the podium for live streaming. Vanessa wasn't organizing a meeting. She was staging a public execution. I didn't go. Instead, I sat at my kitchen table surrounded by folders while rain tapped steadily against the glass. Incident reports stacked beside county deed copies. Certified receipts clipped neatly together. Every orange notice dated and filed. 10 reports now. 3 witness statements. 1 expired marina agreement. And a woman arrogant enough to keep putting threats in writing. At 7:42 p.m., Patricia called. I answered immediately. The sound inside the Marina Clubhouse was loud enough that I had to pull the phone away from my ear. Voices, chairs moving. Grace narrating something dramatically into the live stream camera. Then Patricia whispered, "She's starting." Vanessa's voice cut through the background noise, sharp and amplified through the clubhouse speakers. Briar Ridge is under attack. A few scattered claps followed. I leaned back in my chair, listening silently. Vanessa continued. One resident has chosen to undermine community standards, intimidate volunteers, and refuse lawful compliance procedures. There it was again, lawful. The word she used whenever she wanted people too nervous to ask questions. Patricia lowered her voice. She printed photos of your truck and dock on poster boards. I almost laughed. Theater. Everything had become theater. Vanessa needed the neighborhood scared again. Public fear was the only thing holding Briar Ridge together now. Then I heard Grace speak loudly into the microphone. Comments are exploding online right now, Mom. Of course they were. Vanessa loved audiences. Patricia whispered again. She's introducing a removal vote. That sharpened my attention immediately. Can she even do that? No, Patricia answered. Not legally. But she's saying the board can authorize police enforcement for non-compliant residents. The room behind her grew louder, then suddenly quieter. Patricia inhaled once. She's calling your property community-controlled shoreline now. I closed my eyes for 1 second. There it was. The lie getting bigger because the smaller ones had stopped working. Then Patricia said something unexpected. I brought your letter. I sat forward. What letter? The legal warning Leah drafted. I hadn't known she planned to use it publicly. Before I could answer, I heard movement through the phone, a microphone shifting. Patricia speaking now instead of Vanessa. Her voice shook at first, then steadied. I need to read something into the record. The clubhouse went quiet. Patricia began reading Leah Grayson's formal notice word for word. Mr. Ethan Mercer is not subject to Briar Ridge HOA Enforcement Authority. No active shoreline covenant exists within county records. Continued threats, fraudulent fee collection, or attempts at unlawful removal have been documented and reported under active Sheriff's Department case files. Silence followed. Real silence this time. Then Vanessa exploded. "You are out of order," Patricia kept reading. "8 documented incidents currently exist involving harassment, property interference, and false enforcement claims." I said, "Stop reading." A chair scraped loudly somewhere near the phone. Patricia pushed through anyway. "Any additional enforcement attempts may constitute criminal fraud or civil harassment under Montana property statutes." The room erupted, voices everywhere, some angry, some nervous, some finally sounding uncertain for the first time in months. Then Vanessa shouted something so loud Patricia had to pull the phone away from her ear. "By Saturday morning he'll be gone." The room fell quiet again after that. I heard Grace whisper, "Mom." Vanessa ignored him. "I will personally have law enforcement remove Ethan Mercer from this lake property before the weekend ends." There it was. The threat public. Recorded. Exactly what Leah said we needed. Patricia stepped outside the clubhouse a minute later, breathing hard into the phone. "She lost control," she whispered. "Who was filming?" "Grace live-streamed the entire thing." "Perfect." I looked down at the folders spread across my kitchen table. Evidence didn't get much cleaner than public threats on video. "You should resign," I told Patricia quietly. "I know." Thunder rolled somewhere over the lake. Then Patricia said something that stayed with me long after the call ended. "She's scared, Ethan." "No," I answered. "She's cornered." After we hung up, I walked onto the covered porch overlooking the dock. Rain hammered the lake hard enough to erase the shoreline reflections completely. For 6 months, Vanessa Holloway had controlled Briar Ridge through intimidation. But intimidation only works while people believe authority exists behind it. Now residents were questioning everything. The fees, the notices, the patrols, the threats, and desperate people do dangerous things when they realize fear is slipping away from them. At 11:16 p.m., my phone buzzed one final time. A message from Patricia. She told the board she's calling the sheriff tomorrow morning no matter what. I stared out toward the dark lake while rainwater streamed off the dock roof. Then I thought about Caleb. Saturday patrol rotation, Western District coverage, Briar Ridge inside the zone. And for the first time since this whole mess started, I became absolutely certain how the next morning was going to end. I went inside, locked the folders in the kitchen drawer, and lay awake listening to rain strike cedar boards, while one sentence repeated steadily through my mind. "Tomorrow she's going to call the wrong badge." By 8:15 Saturday morning, the rain had passed. Lake Briar Ridge looked scrubbed, clean, and cold beneath a pale Montana sky. Water dripped from the dock rails while I stood on the porch pouring coffee into Claire's old thermos. Then Grace Holloway's live stream notification appeared on my phone. HOA Enforcement Day, live. I opened the feed. Vanessa had turned my driveway into a stage. Folding chairs lined the edge of the shoreline road. Orange HOA notices sat stacked on a card table beside a portable speaker. Grace moved around filming dramatic close-ups of the dock, the mailbox, and the faded scratch along my truck door like he was covering a crime scene. Neighbors were gathering already. Some curious, some nervous, some looking embarrassed to even be there. Vanessa stood near the driveway entrance, wearing a cream-colored jacket and holding a clipboard against her chest like a badge of office. Then she pulled white sidewalk chalk from her pocket again. I watched through the porch window while she dragged another thick line across my gravel dock path. "Ho shoreline boundary. Do not cross." Grace zoomed in proudly. "Community enforcement action in progress," he narrated. I stepped outside carrying my coffee. The live stream camera swung toward me immediately. "There he is," Grace announced. Vanessa turned slowly and smiled. Not warmly, victorious. "Morning, Ethan." I didn't answer. I walked to the porch table instead and placed 3 things carefully beside the flower boxes Claire built years ago. The county shoreline deed, the certified withdrawal receipt with Vanessa's signature, and the photocopy of the HOA meeting minutes acknowledging my withdrawal. Paper, that was all this had ever really been about. Across the road, Walter Griggs stepped onto his porch carrying a mug with both hands. Marta Chen appeared next. Then Tom and Jenna Reyes. Nobody crossed onto my property. But nobody stood beside Vanessa either. That seemed to bother her more than anything. She looked around at the scattered crowd and lifted her voice louder. Residents of Briar Ridge deserve to feel safe and protected from non-compliant behavior. Grace panned dramatically across the audience. I leaned against the porch rail, quietly sipping coffee. Vanessa hated that. People who build power through intimidation need visible fear to survive. Calmness breaks the illusion. She marched to the edge of my driveway and dialed 911 on speakerphone. This is Vanessa Holloway, president of Briar Ridge HOA. We have an active trespasser refusing lawful removal from HOA-controlled shoreline property. Dispatch asked something too faint to hear through the speaker. Yes, Vanessa snapped impatiently. He's on the property right now. Another question. Yes, technically it's his address, but the shoreline falls under HOA authority. Walter lowered his coffee mug slightly. Tom Reyes looked toward the ground. Even Patricia Sloan appeared at the edge of the crowd now, pale and silent beside her Subaru. Vanessa ended the call and smiled broadly at the livestream camera. Deputies are en route. Grace swung the phone toward me. Anything you want to say before they remove you? I looked directly into the camera. Read the paperwork. That irritated Vanessa immediately. She stepped closer onto the gravel. You really think county deputies are going to side against a legally recognized HOA? I glanced at the deed papers beside the flower boxes, then back at her. I think county deputies can read. A few neighbors looked away, trying not to react. Grace muttered something under his breath. Vanessa's smile tightened. Minutes stretched. The live stream comments scrolled rapidly across Grace's screen. Then finally, from beyond the pine trees near the main road came the sound. A short sheriff's siren chirp. Professional. Close. Vanessa straightened instantly. There we go, she said under her breath. The cruiser rolled slowly into Briar Ridge Drive, tires crunching wet gravel. Grace backed farther into the road for a better live stream angle. Vanessa actually smoothed her jacket with both hands before the cruiser stopped beside the driveway. I noticed Patricia holding her breath across the street. Walter hadn't moved at all. The cruiser engine idled for one long second. Then the driver's side door opened. Deputy Caleb Mercer stepped out in full uniform. Everything stopped. Vanessa's expression collapsed first. Not dramatically, just suddenly. Like somebody had quietly pulled the floor out from under her confidence. Her eyes moved from Caleb's nameplate to me, then back again. Grace lowered the livestream phone slightly. "Mom," he whispered. Caleb shut the cruiser door calmly behind him and adjusted the radio on his shoulder. He never looked at me first, not once. Professional, controlled, exactly what I expected. Vanessa recovered enough to force words out. "Officer, thank God. This man is trespassing on." Caleb interrupted evenly. "Who placed the 911 call?" Vanessa blinked. "I did." Caleb nodded once and opened a small notebook. "All right, explain the emergency." The entire neighborhood stood silent around us. Wind moved lightly across the lake behind the dock. Water tapped softly against cedar posts. And for the first time since Vanessa Holloway started building her little empire around Briar Ridge, she looked unsure. Vanessa cleared her throat and pointed directly at me. "This man is trespassing on HOA shoreline property and refusing lawful removal orders." Caleb wrote something briefly in his notebook. Then he asked the question that changed the entire morning. "Mom, who owns the property located at 214 Briar Ridge Drive?" Vanessa hesitated. The live stream camera trembled slightly in Grace's hands. "Well, technically, who owns the property?" Her jaw tightened. "Ethan Mercer." Caleb nodded once. Then he turned toward me for the first time. "Sir, Do you have identification? I do. I handed him my driver's license along with the folded county deed from the porch table. Vanessa saw the deed immediately. Her expression shifted again. Caleb opened the document slowly, while the neighborhood stood completely silent around us. Water tapped softly beneath the dock. Somewhere farther down the lake, a boat engine hummed briefly and disappeared. Caleb read quietly for nearly 30 seconds. Then he looked back at Vanessa. This deed includes direct shoreline ownership and dock access rights extending to the water boundary. Vanessa folded her arms. The HOA controls the marina agreement. Without speaking, I slid the second document across the porch table. The certified withdrawal receipt. Vanessa's own signature visible across the green card. Caleb picked it up carefully. "Mom," he said evenly, "is this your signature?" Vanessa glanced toward Grace's live stream phone, then toward the neighbors, then finally at the paper itself. "Yes," she answered reluctantly. Caleb nodded again. "This confirms receipt of a formal withdrawal notice from the Briar Ridge Voluntary Marina Association, dated 3 months ago." Vanessa recovered fast. A withdrawal doesn't remove Shoreline Enforcement Authority. That was when Patricia Sloan finally stepped forward from the crowd. Her voice shook slightly. "That's not true." Every head turned toward her. Patricia held a stack of photocopied meeting minutes against her chest. The board acknowledged Ethan's withdrawal during the June meeting. Vanessa spun toward her. "Patricia, stop talking." But Patricia kept going. "The marina agreement expired 8 years ago. Leah Grayson verified it through county records." A ripple moved quietly through the crowd. Walter Griggs lowered his coffee mug slowly. Tom Reyes muttered, "Jesus Christ." Grace whispered something panicked toward his mother, but the live stream microphone picked it up badly enough that nobody could understand him. Caleb took the meeting minutes next. He read them carefully while Vanessa's confidence visibly drained away inch by inch. Finally, he closed the folder. "Mom," he said calmly, "these records indicate the HOA acknowledged Mr. Mercer's legal withdrawal while continuing to issue enforcement notices and threats afterward." Vanessa straightened again. "This community has standards. That's not what I asked." Her face reddened. Caleb continued. "Additionally, there are currently 10 active incident reports involving alleged harassment, property damage, false enforcement notices, and vandalism tied to this dispute." Grace lowered the live stream phone completely now. "You don't need to say all that here," Vanessa snapped. "I absolutely do," Caleb replied. That stunned her, not because he challenged her, because he didn't sound emotional doing it. Professional calm hit harder than anger ever could. Caleb opened another report from his notebook. Deputy Torres documented surveillance footage earlier this week showing a fake HOA tow notice placed on Mr. Mercer's vehicle while your son damaged private property. Grace immediately stepped backward. "I didn't." "Stop talking," Vanessa hissed at him sharply. Too late. The neighbors had heard. Walter Griggs looked physically sick. Marta Chen crossed her arms tightly against her chest. Tom Reyes stared directly at Vanessa now with open disgust. The fear was leaving the neighborhood in real time, and Vanessa could feel it happening. She looked back at Caleb desperately. "You don't understand what this man has done to this community." Caleb closed the notebook slowly. "No, Mom, I understand exactly what happened here." Silence. Wind moved lightly across the shoreline. Then, Caleb delivered the sentence that finally shattered whatever authority Vanessa thought she still had. "Briar Ridge HOA does not appear to possess active legal shoreline enforcement authority over Mr. Mercer's property." Nobody moved. Nobody spoke. Even Grace forgot to stop live streaming. Caleb continued evenly. "Based on these records, Mr. Mercer is standing lawfully on his own deeded property, which means today's 911 call reporting trespassing may constitute a false report." Vanessa's mouth opened slightly, then closed again. For the first time since this entire situation started, she had no performance ready. No speech, no threat, no laminated rule sheet, just panic. A second sheriff's cruiser rolled slowly into Briar Ridge behind Caleb's unit. Deputy Mia Torres stepped out carrying a tablet under one arm. She walked directly toward Grace. "Mr. Holloway," she said calmly, "I need to speak with you regarding the vandalism investigation tied to vehicle damage reported earlier this week." Grace looked immediately toward his mother. Vanessa said nothing, because there was nothing left to say. Everything was already documented. Every threat, every notice, every fake enforcement action, every lie. Caleb handed the deed and certified receipt back to me carefully. Then he looked directly at Vanessa one final time. "You called the police on the one homeowner who kept every piece of paper." The live stream comments were exploding across Grace's screen now. People could see it happening. The collapse. Not loud. Not dramatic, just paperwork stripping authority away, line by line in front of the entire neighborhood. And standing there beside Claire's flower boxes on my own porch, I realized something almost funny. Vanessa Holloway had spent 2 years convincing Briar Ridge that power came from intimidation. But in the end, all it took to dismantle her was a county deed, a certified receipt, and the wrong deputy answering the call. Everything after that moved faster than Vanessa Holloway could stop. Deputy Mia Torres questioned Grace beside the second cruiser, while Caleb finished documenting the false trespassing complaint. Nobody in Briar Ridge spoke much anymore. The crowd that had gathered expecting my removal now stood in complete silence, watching the HOA unravel in real time. Vanessa tried twice to regain control. First, she demanded the live stream end. Grace ignored her. Then she insisted the HOA attorney would handle all further legal communication. That lasted about 6 hours. Because by Saturday evening, Leah Grayson had already forwarded copies of the incident reports, expired marina agreement, witness statements, and live stream footage directly to the county attorney's office. Monday morning, Briar Ridge woke up to 3 things at once. First, Grace Holloway received a formal criminal citation tied to the truck vandalism and fraudulent tow notice. The Sheriff's Department opened a fraud review regarding years of unauthorized HOA fee collection tied to expired shoreline authority. Third, every resident in Briar Ridge received an email from the HOA insurance carrier declining legal coverage for Vanessa's actions. The phrase they used was simple: conduct outside authorized board authority. Translation: you're on your own. That broke the board faster than anything else. By Wednesday, 2 remaining board members resigned. Patricia Sloan called me from the marina parking lot, sounding exhausted and relieved at the same time. "She cleared out her office today," Patricia said quietly. "Vanessa? Half the filing cabinets are gone already." I looked out across the lake from my porch. The chalk line still sat faintly across the gravel drive where she'd drawn it for the cameras. "People finally reading the paperwork?" I asked. Patricia laughed softly. "You'd be amazed how many neighbors suddenly care about bylaws now." The county attorney moved carefully after that. No dramatic raids, no handcuffs on television, just paperwork, subpoenas, financial reviews, interview requests. The exact kind of slow legal pressure Vanessa had spent years pretending to understand. Turns out she understood intimidation better than documentation. Walter Griggs recovered nearly every dollar he paid into fake HOA fines after Leah organized a civil claim for affected homeowners. Marta Chen received reimbursement too. Tom and Jenna Reyes settled their violations entirely. 14 households total. 14 families who had spent years paying money they never legally owed. Grace accepted a plea agreement over the truck vandalism and property interference, community service, restitution for repairs, mandatory fines. He never looked directly at me again after that Saturday. Caleb transferred patrol districts 2 weeks later. His decision. Cleaner that way, he told me over Sunday dinner. I understood. People in small counties talk too much already. He set his hat on the kitchen counter while I finished carving pot roast and glanced toward the framed certified receipt hanging near the hallway. Vanessa's signature sat perfectly visible behind glass. Caleb almost smiled. "She really signed her own disaster," he muttered. "Most arrogant people do eventually." Outside, the lake reflected orange evening light through the kitchen windows. For the first time in months, the silence around Briar Ridge felt normal again. No golf cart patrols, no orange notices, no fake authority speeches drifting across the shoreline. Just water against docks, wind through pine trees, and neighbors slowly learning how peaceful life becomes when fear leaves a place. 3 weeks after the sheriff call, Briar Ridge held another HOA meeting inside the Marina Clubhouse. This time, Patricia ran it. No live streams, no podium speeches, no enforcement language, just folding chairs and coffee. The vote to remove Vanessa from HOA leadership passed almost unanimously. Afterward, Patricia walked over while people stacked chairs. "We're restructuring everything," she said. "Voluntary, association only, community cookouts, boat cleanup days, no fines, no enforcement. That's what it should have been from the start." She nodded. "You coming to the 4th of July barbecue?" I thought about saying no automatically. Then I remembered Claire sitting on this very lake years ago laughing while smoke from old charcoal grills drifted across the shoreline. "Yeah," I said finally. "I think I will." Vanessa moved out 1 month later. No goodbye party, no dramatic scene. Just a moving truck backed into her driveway early on a Tuesday morning. I watched from my dock while workers loaded boxes into the trailer. Grace stayed inside the entire time. Vanessa never once looked toward my property. By sunset, the house stood empty. The for sale sign appeared the next morning. A week later, I finally washed the chalk line off the driveway. Took less than 10 minutes. That part stayed with me longer than I expected. Months of threats, thousands of dollars in fake authority. Neighborhood fear stretching across years, and in the end, the line disappeared with a garden hose and a stiff brush, like it had never belonged there in the first place. That evening, I rehung Claire's hummingbird feeder beside the porch. Vanessa had fined us for it once under unauthorized wildlife attraction. Claire laughed about that notice for 2 straight days before she got sick. Now the feeder swung gently above the dock again, exactly where she wanted it. The hummingbirds returned before the week ended. So did the neighbors. People started leaving kayaks beside their docks again. Wind chimes returned to porches. Walter Griggs put his old John boat back into the water without asking permission from anybody. Briar Ridge still looked the same from a distance. Same lake, same pine trees, same cedar docks, but underneath it, something fundamental had changed. People stopped confusing loudness with authority. And every morning now, when I step onto the porch with coffee in my hand, the first thing I see hanging beside the front door is that framed green certified receipt. Proof, not that I won, but that paper, patience, and truth eventually outlast every bully who thinks fear makes them powerful. And after everything Vanessa Holloway tried to take from me, I never had to leave my own dock.
You know, if there's one thing this whole mess taught me, is that a lot of people keep up their peace the moment somebody speaks loudly enough with a badge, a title, or a stack of papers. But real life doesn't work that way. Sometimes the difference between losing your home and protecting it comes down to slowing down long enough to read what's actually in front of you. In my case, it's what a counted a certified letter, and the patience to keep records instead of losing my temper. And honestly, I think that's made beyond just HOA, lands, homes, families, property. Those things carry memories. They carry years of work. Most folk aren't trying to find anybody. They just want to live quiet without being pushed around. This dignity is standing your ground calmly and letting the truth speak for itself. If you ever deal with an HOA, a property dispute, or somebody trying to intimidate you with rules they barely understood themselves, drop a yes down in the comments. And if you believe patience and paperwork still matter in this country, type stand your ground. And if stories like this remind you that quiet people can still protect what matters, go ahead and subscribe. There are plenty small stories from lakes, branch roads, and small towns still to come.